It's straight at the door behind me and to the right side. We are planning no fire tests tonight, to be pleased to know. So if the fire alarm does go off, please exit either side of the front podium or to the rear fire exit, and you will be guided to the meeting point. I've also been asked to remind people that if you have parked in the Geneva car park, after we finish the proceedings tonight, you could make your way quite swiftly over through the front of Geneva and out the back. Otherwise, you will be locked in for the weekend. An opening speech would be nothing without. So I'd like to pay particular tribute tonight to the work of colleagues, friends, typified by the work of Jane Simpson. Please put your hands together for Jane. To Katie Bell and Kate Bell and Katie Freer from the Glenvivian Gallery itself. To Caroline Thraves and Derek Baton from Swansea College of Art for their hard work in planning and preparing, and particularly to the colleagues who are unseen tonight in black t-shirts around the room who've worked tirelessly in the last couple of weeks, and particularly today to set up the lighting, the filming and the live streaming of this event. Because you're live on the internet, okay, so let's hope that works. I've been asked to keep it brief, so I'm going to move straight on to the main point of our evening, which is a conversation with someone who I believe is now a dear friend of Swansea College of Art and of the university, and a particular champion of Swansea. We have two guest interviewers tonight to interview Sir Peter. The first one is Jude Rogers. Jude is Swansea born, arts correspondent for some 15 years of The Guardian and Observer. It's great to have you with us tonight back in your hometown. Our second interviewer would be no stranger to many people in the room, Jeff Towns, simply one of the world's leading authorities on the works of Dylan Thomas. So please put your hands together to welcome our special guest, Sir Peter Blake, and our guest interviewers.
Hello, thank you for that lovely introduction.
Thank you.
Yes, I am Swansea born, I'm back home, I've got family in the audience. It's lovely to be here, and it's lovely to be here talking about a writer that I grew up with, was part of the fabric of my childhood, my school time. Anybody born and bred in Swansea after Under Milkwood was written can't get away from Under Milkwood. When I was asked to be at this event a couple of months ago, I was obviously delighted. Not only Dylan Thomas has been part of my life, but Sir Peter as well, obviously. And then I also met Jeff, who's now part of my life too. It's very exciting. So what we're going to do tonight is talk a little bit about Sir Peter's career. You know, he's not just done beautiful paintings of Under Milkwood. He's done other things. You may have heard of them. But we will give a little bit of background about the journey up to Under Milkwood in many ways. You know, who Peter was in his early career and what influenced him, and how that almost comes together in what you've seen tonight. And those of you who've been over already to the gallery, or will see from tomorrow at the exhibition, this incredible body of work based on a play for voices that has obsessed you for a very long time and infatuated you and made you create in so many different ways. What's it like being here in Swansea tonight to talk about Dylan Thomas?
Well, I think what quite an interesting point is that when I first showed the work, that there were a couple of critics who said, this is a play for voices, it shouldn't be illustrated. And it's been very rarely illustrated. Kerry Richards did it. But there were very few others, and in a curious way, perhaps I shouldn't have. Perhaps I was interfering too much. But what was fascinating for me was to make it visual. You know, it was to read those beautiful lines of poetry and make them be pictures. So that was my first feeling about it.
And when did you first come across Dylan Thomas? I understand that when you were a young man, you were aware of his work
At the Royal College, I was there from 53 to 56, and there were a group of Welsh students who were from Newport and Cardiff and the Welsh art schools. And when the first reading was on radio, they didn't actually illustrate it, but they painted pictures about it. So I was familiar with it then. I'm not sure that I heard the first reading, but I would have heard it very early on or read it very early on in the mid-50s.
And this is obviously after Dylan died, and any Dylan Thomas knowledge, I will obviously defer to Jeff. We've got some slides of some images. I chose for the first one, if you can see it. A picture of one of the first, an early painting of yours, an early poster of yours, 1940. There it is, lovely. So this is Lord George Sanger's circus poster, and this is something that you made when you were 17 years old. Now, you were born in Kent, you grew up in Dartford, you were evacuated several times during the Second World War to Worcester for one of those times.
Helens Bumpstead, the other.
Yeah, fantastic.
In Essex, great name.
And you also, so you were evacuated several times, and then you came back and you went to Gravesend Technical College, and this is after you failed your 11+, which I hadn't realised, and you, this is, you were somebody who was interested in art, but you hadn't explored it in any particular way, and suddenly there were some teachers who spotted your talent.
Well, the sequence of events was that because I was evacuated to Essex, that you still took the examination for where you were from. So this lonely figure took the examination for Kent. I failed it. My brother and sister both went to, they passed it and went to the grammar school. But I got a place at Gravesend Technical School, and when I went for the interview, the man doing the interview said, if you were interested in art, the art school is part of the technical school. You could go to the art school if you go do a drawing exam now. So at the age of 13, I went to junior art department and for 3 years. So that's how I started off. But until then, because of the war, I hadn't had any access to art, no art books, and I probably didn't draw. So it was only when the war finished that I started to draw.
And this is 4 years after the end of the Second World War, and you instantly, from this point, you can see the influences that would carry on throughout your career, and we still see in the Dylan Thomas work today.
No, the thing was, at Gravesend, I did the 3 years junior art department, and then you did the intermediate examination, which was the equivalent of that starting examination now, foundation. And then you chose whether you would go towards commercial art or fine art. And I chose fine art, but was advised that I would never make a living in fine art to do the commercial art course. They'd be dead by now. So I did the commercial art course.
So this was a piece of commercial art?
Yeah. So after a year, so this would have been done on the commercial art course. So after a year, I tried for the Royal College halfway through the National Diploma in Commercial Art, and Robin Darwin I sent one painting, and he saw the painting, and they accepted me at the Royal College in the painting school. So then I had to do national service for 2 years. So I arrived at the Royal College in 53, never having been a painting student, with a year. Yeah, I mean, in a way, that's why I'm a rogue, that's why I'm a kind of rogue commercial artist and a rogue painter. And that's why I can do weird stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wrestlers, boxing, yeah.
Popular culture.
Yeah.
It's all over that poster, isn't
So this is pre-pop art. Because what my, I mean, I'm sure it will come up, but what my kind of branch of the contribution to pop art was, I mean, pop art, as you know, Jeff, and as you know, but in America, you had Jasper Johns and Robert Rauschenberg in the early 50s as precursors to pop art. And then at the end of the decade, you had Andy Warhol and Lichtenstein and that generation. In England, at the ICA, you had the independent group, which was Eduardo Palazzi and Richard Hamilton, the Smithsons, the architects. And I was a visitor to the ICA, but not a member. But at the Royal College, I was halfway through my course, and in 1954, you did a year in the painting department, which was in the life room, which was compulsory, and then you could paint whatever you wanted. And I started to paint what my life was about.
We've got a picture of you, a photograph of you during your time at the Royal College of Art, I think up next.
I just rewatched Ben Russell.
Yeah.
And you're in that with the other half a generation older. Botti, Rosier.
No, Botti, Phillips, Boscia. Boscia, yeah.
That's very interesting.
Lovely film. I mean, it was Ken Russell's first full-length film.
It's got all the elements of Ben Russell. You're lying in bed with your eyes closed.
Only the beginning. But this would have probably been 1954, and there's some of the early pictures of tattooed ladies. So it started by then.
We've got a picture.
Yeah, that's right.
Dancing girl. Had to be clad for a tattoo.
Yeah, that one is, isn't she? Yeah.
We've got next picture we've got up. I know a lot of people will know. So this is this to me is, you know, it's always been to me a pop art picture. Although, you know, it's 1961, so this is before the Beatles were going, but they weren't the Beatles. They were in Hamburg. They were learning their craft. This is before that explosion of British.
It's before the second generation. As I say, there was the first generation of Rauschenberg and Johns.
Yes.
And then that was the pre-pop art, but this was very early pop art.
Early, yeah.
59, really, it was when pop art started to emerge as a movement. And this was 61.
And obviously it references Thomas Gainsborough's painting, and you've got the idea of, there's this idea of traditional portraiture.
And the Watteau painting of the Pierrot.
Yeah, and instead of wearing blue silk, there you are in your denim and your badges.
And I think what it anticipates, people wouldn't have worn denim then as a fashionable thing. It would have been worn as a work garment. And adults didn't wear a multitude of badges. They'd wear one to denote the club they were in. So what was odd about it, looking back, was it was being a child again. Yeah. Your children would have worn a lot of badges. So it's badges about belonging to a cinema club or something like that.
29, that's like a young boy. You look like a hipster. You've got French workman's clothes on.
Yeah.
You've got a pair of basketball boots.
Yeah, and again, people wouldn't have worn basketball boots except for playing basketball. It wouldn't have been a fashion thing.
Do you think long and hard about what?
No, I think people were beginning to wear denim. Richard Hamilton always wore denim all the time. So it was, and I'd had a scholarship to Europe from when I left the Royal College. So from 56 to 57, I'd travelled in Europe and bought. To go back to the denim trousers, there was a teacher at Gravesend who visited New York right at the end of the war, the first year of peace, and he came back with a pair of denims, and I loved them, but you couldn't buy them here, so I bought a kind of builder's bib and tuck suit, cut the top off, and made a pair of denim trousers, and then bought the jacket in France on the scholarship. So it predated wearing denim.
Yeah, the fact is 1961 really just...
It's early, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very contemporary.
Elvis became like an incredible icon. Select that magazine, because in some ways it's early for Elvis.
It just denoted that I was an Elvis fan.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you look back at that period now? Do you remember the 60s?
I do, yeah. I didn't do any drugs. So, I mean, people say, if you remember the 60s, you weren't there.
Yes.
But I've never done any drug of any kind, so I remember it all. But it was an exciting time for all kinds of reasons. You had music, you had the Beatles, and you had rock and roll being born. And in art, it was exciting. And it was near enough to the end of the war. You were glad to be alive. It was only 5 years after the end of the war. So enormous gratitude to have gone to art school or to be at art school. So it was an incredibly exciting time.
And when you were in art school, you got really interested in folk art and that side of it, which obviously, when you get to this period, the early 1960s, folk art and the art of the ordinary people is starting to come in and be accepted, obviously, in a much more, in more different ways, in more artistic ways. That must have been very exciting as well.
There was a big exhibition that Barbara Jones put on called something and Lemonade.
Yes.
Which
Black Eyes and Lemonade.
Which I saw, and that set off my interest in. And I was also taught for a year by Enid Marks, who came to Gravesend to stand in for somebody for a year, and she introduced us to popular art. There was a man in Gravesend, an old sea captain, down by the river, who it was opposite Tilbury, so every day there'd be a boat on the Orient line going off to China or India or wherever, and he had a big klaxon, and he'd always wish them bon voyage, and he had a private collection of figureheads. So Enid Marks took us to see this collection, and I think that, with the Barbara Jones exhibition, set off this interest in folk art and outsider art.
Did it make you think about things you'd grown up with, the kind of culture of the part of the world you came from? Did you have a lot of people from London moving out to Kent? And
well, it tied in with the fairground stuff and hopping, and not hopping, but you're picking hops.
Yes.
Where I lived in Dartford, every year you'd see the lorries going down to the hop fields, where the Cockneys would go down, pick hops for a week, and live in these little kind of pigsties almost that were there just for the hoppers. So I was aware of all that. And Kent's a weird place. I mean, that bit of Kent is poised. It's the first bit outside Greater London, Dartford, and so you've got the East End touching it on one side, and you've got the country touching it on the other side, and it produces a kind of hybrid of something. People like Mick Jagger and myself. People
who are close but not too close. You've got it's on the horizon.
I can't account for it, but I know it's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And we jump forward a little bit now. We will come back to something from the mid-60s in a moment, but this is 1981 to 83, and this is Have a Nice Day, Mr. Hockney. Yeah. So by this period, you are, obviously your name becomes, you become a celebrity really in a certain way in the 1960s. And how does that affect your work, and how does that affect you? You seem very, from our brief meeting already, you seem somebody that doesn't let that seep in very much. You don't let it affect your work.
Well, this was a picture done. I'd visited Los Angeles, and Howard Hodgkin and I went together, and coming back on the plane, I said, shall we each do 3 pictures about the trip? And show them together. And the idea was to make in a gallery, make a simple white box, and put sand on the floor as though it was a Los Angeles gallery, and show a picture by each of us on the 3 on the walls. So So that was one of my three, and it's so it's me. It's of the Courbet, Bonjour Monsieur Courbet. So it's me with Howard as my servant. You're arriving and meeting Courbet.
When did you first become aware of work here? You're a young man, so maybe it was this time, I don't know.
Yeah, that was early on, wasn't it? It was pre-pop art. Yeah, it was still pre. Yeah. Or it was probably something like the self-portrait with badges. That was 61.
What I've always found with your work, and as somebody coming to your work as a fan rather than expert, is the use of colour in it, the immediacy of it. But there's also sort of, there's an intimacy in it as well to me, you know, that you can feel that you're in that scene, you're kind of within it. And also, you know, a lot of the music work you've done as well connected to that.
No, I've always lived in London. For 10 years I lived in Somerset during the 70s. But a lot of my generation did. Dick Smith moved to New York and David moved to LA, obviously. No, I've always been in London.
One thing you're very interested in at the moment, I know, and you can see it in some of the Dylan Thomas, the most recent work on the Dylan Thomas collages and illustrations, is found objects. We've got an image of, this is Museum of Black and White 8 from 2010, and this is something that's really influenced your work over the years. And thinking of everything we've seen across the road, this use of colour and character, but also bringing in elements from, you know, real life and, you know, from pop culture and from pop ephemera is something that interests you and still interests you.
An ongoing series. The first about 6 were just called the Museums of the Colour White, and in terms of being a painter, it was saying, all this is white, but there is no one white. Now any kind of colour chart you get has 20 different whites.
Yes.
I mean, it used to be just white, didn't it?
Yeah.
There was one white, and then it developed into black and white. So this is a series that goes on, and these are probably things I happen to have. I mean, that curious the written bit at the bottom line, second from the left, is from a book I bought, which was meant to be related to a lecture on religion, that you used that image as you said something. So it doesn't make any sense on its own, but it makes sense with the text of the book. So it's stuff like that. So it's quite surrealistic, and it goes on. I'll carry on with that too. Yeah.
Yeah, if any of you haven't seen this, it's in the shop. It's amazing.
Won't stay on the shelves. And
Well, what that series is based on is that they put on a show at the RA, the Royal Academy in London, a couple of years ago, called Wanderlust, and it took the section of the work that he did about Europe, and he was a lonely man who lived with his mother and his disabled brother, who he looked after, and he adored Europe and never travelled. He never left the east coast of America. He'd go in from Flushing, where he lived, into New York, but he never travelled to Europe. But there's a story about a conversation he had with Duchamp, where they talked about Paris, and he showed Duchamp how to get from the Louvre to a certain hotel, and he'd never been. but he knew exactly the route. So I was so moved by this exhibition that I thought and he never consummated any relationship. So I thought, you've had a rough time. I'm going to take you on holiday to Europe. So it's a series called Joseph Cornell's Holiday, and it's a made-up travel rock and roll tour bus with Wanderlust on the side, and he goes everywhere and he meets people. He's been everywhere. He goes to Dartford, and obviously he's incredibly bored with it. And there's a jazz. Oh, he didn't meet me. There's a jazz band playing, and he can't wait to get away from Dartford. But the one here, they're in two sizes. There's one which is about that big, really big collages, and then there's another one which is the size of the one here. But they all have a blue border. So this is outside the story, but he does come to Swansea.
And he meets the great and good of Swansea.
And he meets Dylan Thomas.
Who were the people in there?
Well, originally it was Tom Jones and Dylan Thomas and Harry Seacombe, special request, Harry Seacombe, and then and Richard Burton. And then I had a phone call from Jane saying, could we have a woman in it? Well, no, it started with one. So we added the singer. We added Shirley Bassey.
You've also got Catherine Zeta-Jones from when she was in the Darling Buds.
Well, then I had another phone call saying, could we have another woman? So I added Catherine Jenkins. Then the third phone call. So they're equal now. I think there are three men. So there's a little Welsh girl. Well, that's just a note about history, and so it's equal now. There are three men and three women. Yeah, very much. He's still here. He's still here. And two of them are singing. Two of them have got mics. So.
I do love the Catherine Zeta-Jones. She looks like she could be a character in Under Milkwood in a hat with a...
Yes, as you say, it's from Darling Buds and May.
It's perfect for this.
Yeah.
So obviously, a lot of people here and elsewhere will know Dylan Thomas being in a college on something else that he did. We'll show a picture of here. There he is, in the middle of the great and the good. So Dylan Thomas was there in the Sgt. Pepper cover, and it was I've read that all the Beatles loved Bob Dylan.
They love both, yeah. They love
Dylan
both.
also loved Dylan Thomas. That's why he's called Bob Dylan, of course. But John Lennon had nominated him for the cover. But did that mean something to you at that point? You know, the fact that he was in this mixture of pop culture icons on this cover that was such a big budget production at the time and going to be a big thing in culture.
I mean, as you say, I didn't nominate him, John,
nice
but I might well have done,
because
what we did was we all made a list. Once I'd worked out the idea of the crowd could be any kind of, it could be anybody by doing it in. It's not the original wasn't a collage; it was built. Yeah. So the heads are that size, and we built a set. So it could be anybody. They're cut out plywood. So this crowd of fans could be literally anybody. I mean, John at one point chose Jesus, but we decided it wasn't appropriate, so we didn't put him in.
I heard that Hitler was there.
Hitler was there as a joke, but we actually made him up. Yeah. So on early, on some of the photographs of when we did it, he's still there. So he's actually behind them in the photograph. But no, but I was pleased Dylan Thomas was there. Who's in
Marlon Brando next to
Tom Dix and Dion on the Belmont. Lenny Bruce, Tony Curtis, Tyrone Power, a good Alistair Crowley. A good mix.
Good gang. Yeah. So you've told us about when you first heard Under Milkwood and you fell in love with the lines and you had these Welsh students around you. But your Is it fair to say your obsession really kicked off in the 80s, just before you went to Milan, and you decided to
Now, what happened was we formed a group. I won't go into it in any depth, but in the 70s, I was in Somerset. We formed a group of artists working together called the Brotherhood of Ruralists. And a ruralist is someone who is from the city but moves to the country. So, so as part of that, we would go. We go on holiday each year. That's right. As part of it, and I met a man who became my dentist, but he also was a book collector and printer, and but he set all the type up himself. What's that called? No, it's a different word. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I mean it is that, but he said, "Can we do a book together?" So I had to think which book, and it came down to Under Milkwood. And I started it by, I mean, he was particularly interested in wood engraving. So in the exhibition, I started it as a set of wood engravings. And after about a year, I thought, this is going to take too long. I'll do it some other way. It then took me 28 years. Because I got deeper and deeper into it. It got out of hand, quite honestly. So it ended up, as you know, with it starts with everybody in the town dreaming, and there are 27 dreams in watercolor, and then I decided to illustrate everyone that's mentioned. So even if they don't have a line, they're mentioned. So that was 60 sheets of drawings, some of which have 4 people on. So if it says four old ladies are talking, the 4 old ladies are on one sheet. And then I think there are 84 other illustrations. So it kind of got out of hand.
Got slightly out of hand.
And took 28 years.
We've got a map of Regib.
Which you showed me some years ago.
Tell us about that, Jeff.
Well, when I first talked to you about it, I thought Under Milkwood is a kind of photo soap opera, way that gossip.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It kind of reinforced that notion you had of seeing Under Milkwood as a pop drama.
Yeah.
About folk in a village. So like that. They said.
Yeah.
That's his map, so where people were going. It's a beautiful map.
I love the boat.
I had it in my hands once, shopping Swansea. But I said to me, "What would you pay for that?" I said, "Well, I'll give you 4-figure sum. Tell me it's for sale, I'll tell you what." And it never came back to me. It's the National Library of Wales.
Oh.
John Minton.
Yeah.
Did John teach?
Yeah, at the Royal College, you had a tutor each year, and my tutor for the first year was Johnny Minton, and he became a friend, and he died in '56, I think. So, at the moment, absolutely, deservedly, isn't he?
But this is interesting. John Minton, first British artist, illustrator.
Yeah, that's first. I didn't know that until now.
The Observer newspaper, 1954. Before he died, Dylan had abridged Under Milkwood Mademoiselle magazine. Sold it again in London. Again, but over 2 weeks, published Under Milkwood in the Observer paper.
I
And you
didn't
can
know
see it
that.
in the exhibition.
Well, I
in a
do know
second.
because it's in the exhibition, but I didn't know until you told me.
What was he like to work with, to be with as an artist, John Minton?
Well,
You can see some, some influences in some of your work.
Well, it was the last year of his life, as I said, and he was homosexual, which was forbidden then, so it must have been difficult. and he was drinking an incredible amount. There were a group of people around the Royal College. I mean, Bacon had a studio in the college, and Johnny was friends with the two Roberts, Cahorn and McBride, the painters from Glasgow. And they were just riot. I can't imagine it happening now, but they were great drinkers, great rousterers, everywhere in Soho. I mean, it's a whole other story. We could do an evening on it.
I loved reading that you came to the Royal College of Art in October 1953.
Yeah.
And Dylan Thomas died in November 1953, obviously not in London.
We could have overlapped by a month, yeah.
We could have sat next to each other at a bar. And
we might have done, yeah. I didn't much use those, the particular bars he went to, although he went to the Soho bars, didn't he? So we could have been in the, I bet we were in the same room. For a month.
They're very beautiful, yeah. And then we got a woodcut, which...
First, I went down to have...
That's right, yeah.
And he said, I'm doing another Dylan Thomas book. And I was ravished. I mean, then had some page settings.
Yeah.
Book that was has some woodcuts in it.
Yeah.
Your first image was quite clear.
That's right, yeah. Just the block, the wood block, yeah.
That was what Paul Nash used.
Well, Paul Nash for Genesis took little ticks out of the edge of the block. It wasn't the pure block, he just took little tiny ticks. Just a simple, yeah. Yeah. And then, as I say, it took so long that and then of course we lost the rights on it 3 times, the rights to publish, because I just kept going, and eventually Mike had kept it set up, but it had rotted. So eventually it was done not letterpress. That's what the word I was trying to remember. It is letterpress, yeah.
A long time in the making. It should be ready soon. That was in 1989.
And when did it come out?
2013.
Did you like working with woodcuts?
Yes, well, I'd done it as a student. So in the 70s, I had a kind of project to go back to some earlier ways of working. And I did some etching and some wood engraving. And I did a portfolio called Sideshow. And then I didn't do any more. I think that was 5 of a kind of a fat boy and a tattooed man, a bearded lady. And then there was a gap to this. And I retaught myself. Yeah.
To do many works, very time-consuming.
Time-consuming and difficult. It's an incredibly difficult medium. I still do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely love it.
A lot of people.
Is it? Yeah. You could probably... The odd thing about having been so close to Under Milkwood, I can't quote any of it. People can quote it, can't they? I mean, I heard it hundreds of times and read it probably hundreds of times. I couldn't even quote the opening.
It says, all those babies she's got there, all I can say is, better give up bird's nest. All I can say, that kind of hobby for a woman that can't say no, even to midget. Remember Tom Spith was anything bigger than a baby, ever 2. So, for that quote, but it's wonderful, and it allows you to, that's not...
It's not Tom Thumb. No, it's not Tom Thumb.
Similar to an image of...
It is, yeah. There's an image. Because Tom Thumb, the original, well, not the original midget, but he was the midget with the Barnum and Bailey circus, and I own his boots. I own a pair of his boots. And he's one of my heroes.
I just love the way that text gets you into certain areas that it's almost as if it was written for you.
Well, that was the excitement eventually. Yeah. Yeah,
It allows you to
a lot.
do that
Yeah,
you love to do.
yeah, absolutely.
The imagery of the Welsh lady with the Welsh hat, well, obviously crops up a couple of times as well. Kind of, when did you first become aware of the amazing costume that all female children are forced to wear in school for about 6 years?
Well, I think, I mean, it's not being unkind, obviously.
No, absolutely not. It's quite
I mean,
quite
you know instantly that they're Welsh.
Yeah.
It's a motif, it's a
Yeah.
cipher. I mean, you know that they're Welsh ladies, don't
Yeah,
you?
it's a very... It's funny when you
And
see
there's
it
one
in...
who's not in
No.
the national costume. Yeah.
In some ways, when you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 women in Welsh costume together, it makes you realise how completely bizarre it is.
Is it still worn?
Yeah, school children do. On,
Do they?
St David's Day.
Yeah.
Little girls do, yeah.
But there aren't enclaves in Wales where
I don't know
in
if there's
village.
I don't know anybody here dressed up in a tall hat. I don't know. We'll have to ask around later. But some teachers do, yeah, it's in school. But generally little girls and little boys wear a version of it, but not as elaborate, obviously.
So it becomes a school uniform.
Just for St David's Day.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh, I
St.
see.
David's
Yeah.
Day. Yeah. Tell us about when you first went to Larne. This was 1986, is that right?
It tells the story in the exhibition. You'll see it. But what happened was that Mike and I, to research, we made at least 3 times we arranged to visit, and 3 times we had to cancel, and then eventually we coincided that we could go on a certain day, and Mike and his wife and I drove down to Larne. We arrived in the town, went into the pub, and there was a film crew there. And I thought, well, that's not really unusual. I expect they're here quite a lot. And I said, why are you here? And they said, well, Caitlin is in the town, and she hadn't been back. This was 30 years after when Dylan died, and she'd left the town. She'd come back that particular day for a book signing, which was extraordinary.
Yeah.
So it tells the story in the exhibition. But I kept the ticket with the date on, and I took a photograph of her with a Ronwy in the shop. And it's just such an amazing coincidence that after 30 years, we went on the same day.
What were your first impressions of Larne? Did it speak to you as a Llaregib, or did it...
Oh, very much. Well, until later, I didn't know that he'd based it on both Larne and Newquay. I think what didn't gel, what didn't make sense, was that there didn't seem to be an actual harbour. Whereas under Milkwood there is a harbour, and that's the Newquay bit, isn't it? But it was Milkwood. There's no question.
Did you meet any characters?
Well, we saw the postman coming down the street, and it had the same feeling. You felt that there were illicit relationships going on, and stuff was going on. It felt like Milkwood.
There's a documentary you did 5 years ago now, which Jeff is also in, when you had the Dylan Thomas work in Cardiff. And there was a butcher who was interviewed in that, who had New Zealand lamb signs behind him, which you wouldn't have today. I thought it was quite funny. And he was this was from the 60s, and it could very well have been him that it was based on, his character.
No, it still felt exactly like Dylan Thomas's Milkwood. Yeah.
Did it kind of remind you of anything about where you grew up, or kind of little cultures, or was it exotic to you, this idea of this Welsh community?
No, I was kind of familiar with communities. I'd been evacuated to a village, so I was very conscious of village life, and so no, I knew about communities, but it felt exactly like Milkwood, which is unusual.
Yeah, it's interesting when you kind of grow up with a book and you read it in school and read it, and may not get all the racier bits when you're younger, but the flow of the language, as the Welsh person in the front here tonight, is just so South Walian. Kind of the rhythms of the language, the gossipiness, the this like harshness of some of the phrases. Yeah.
No idea about Welsh.
Yes, yeah.
One of them's got a bit of an Irish brogue.
He wants a Geordie, isn't
They're
he?
all trying. So I have a feeling that it was made under milk
Yeah.
as Welsh as it's because to start with, and it had a little thing you start with it, go abroad with it, much afterwards to say so much about our village.
All right.
Yeah.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's become very Welsh. Films have been all Welsh actors in films, and it's always performed now very, very strong Welsh actors, which is fine. I've got no problem with it, but I think it's become a more Welsh item than it actually was when he wrote it.
And you've lived in Swansea for many years now, haven't you? Yeah. So kind of you've become part of that language and that world as well.
Just accent hasn't.
No.
But no, I think I think had Dylan lived, I'm not sure how it would have gone. I think the fact that he died just after doing the first performance, firstly, or first second, it gave an added poignancy, and Richard Burton so invested Dylan's death.
He took it over, didn't he? Yeah, I mean, yeah.
For a long while, and since then, other great actors have had a go, and it's performed once a week somewhere in the world. Someone's doing under your wood, it seems to me. So.
One thing that struck me about the exhibition, and you can see we've got some more pictures as well. We've got the next one.
How are we doing for time, Joe?
Okay,
Oh, fine.
Yeah, we got it. It's up here. So we've one thing that struck me is that you the active writing, the words as well to accompany the pictures, and so they're in these beautiful, very small, intimate little book pages. You were saying to me earlier that was quite a lovely thing to do, to kind of engage with the words and write them in your very familiar, handwriting.
Well, it was
Tell us about this one.
Well, it was exciting to choose the passage anyway. I mean, sometimes it could be 2 words, and sometimes it had to be almost a page. And I like writing. I mean, I did learn late in life calligraphy, so I'm familiar with I can do calligraphy. I mean, I was saying to you earlier that it was interesting to do the Reverend Eli Jenkins' White Book of Laregub, which he did in calligraphy. So I did it in bad calligraphy. I had to make some mistakes and do it as though somebody. And I used writing quite often. That when Mog Edwards writes and they write to each other, it's in their writing. Yeah. So I used writing quite a bit. Yeah.
You had a rubber stamp made too, didn't you?
Yeah, I had a rubber stamp. Well, I had the printed bit done at the top and the rubber stamp of Shop at Moggs. Yeah.
Tell us about this.
Tell you what, sorry.
But when you're making you make a lot of the pages for Under Mogwood in so many different styles. So we've seen collage. Now we're kind of seeing this is watercolor, I'm guessing.
Oh yes, is it the dream?
Yes, it's a dream.
Oh yeah. Well, what I chose to do was, it opens, as I say, with everybody dreaming. So there are 27 dreams in watercolor, and then did I say this earlier?
You mentioned the watercolor.
And then there are 60 sheets of portraits. Yeah, I did. I've said this already. So this was the use of watercolor was constant throughout the dreams, and then in the 84, the mixture of ways of working. There were pencil drawings and pen and ink. I mean, the little boat eventually was very tight, cross-hatched, traditional way of working. So this was a watercolor within that set.
Yeah.
This is one line in the passage. This little piggy went to market comes at the end, and that's the image that you tell them. This is almost Beatrix Potter, like watercolor.
Yeah. But it's a pig instead of Peter Rabbit, yeah.
And a little bit more sinister as well. We've got another one of the shop window.
Well, this was done as a collage, and the photograph of the window was taken by the photographer that became your friend. Yeah. So I appropriated that, and then it's really everything that he lists. So he lists rat poison.
Plastic buckets, henna, rat traps, shrimp nets, sugar, stamps, confetti, paraffin, hatchets, and whistles. And I did it, and they're all there.
They're all there.
You must have sat there thinking, where am I going to find?
Yeah, exactly.
They're arcane images too, aren't they? They're wonderful.
Yeah.
From things like the Army and Navy catalogues.
That was a big source of it. And there's the other list like that of the seashore, where one of the things was dandruff.
Behind the eyes are the secrets of the dreamers, bobs and button tops, bags and bones, ash and rime, dandruff and nail parings, saliva and snowflakes and molted feathers. And that image
Has everything.
Dandruff, didn't you?
Yeah.
Where am I going to get dandruff?
I looked it up on the internet and found hundreds of dandruff. Cures.
That's quite new for you to go to the internet.
This was towards the end of doing.
These great 50-volume French encyclopedias that were battered.
That's how it started. But towards the end, I was calling on the internet.
Opening drawers in your studio, and there would just be all these little cut-out bikes, and another drawer would be and then drawers of white things.
Which I still do. I've added the internet to.
Yeah, but you don't go to the internet as a first port of call, do you?
No, it's a last resource. Yeah.
Not not a failure to have to go to the internet, but for the dandruff.
For dandruff.
Yeah.
and nail parings.
Nail parings, they're there. I think I drew them.
Why do you think you've been such a collector throughout your life?
It's very accountable for you. As a kid, as I say, I was 7 when the Second World War started. I was evacuated most of the war, and there were no books in the houses, and there were no objects really, and it was very quite difficult. But when I started at Gravesend School of Art at the age of 13, there was a junk shop right by the station, and I went into it probably on my first day at art school and bought a papier-mâché tray, which kind of tied in with Victoriana, and a complete set of Shakespeare, which gave me a library of leather-bound Shakespeare, and a painting of the Queen Mary, an outsider art painting of the Queen Mary. So I had an instant collection, and it went from there. And now I've exhibited parts of the collection a few times, and I usually the books have gone. I've got a new set of Shakespeare's now, of miniature ones, but I show the picture and the tray and the book. So and he's back now. I'm at the end of the collecting now, I think, pretty much.
Jeff, could you correct us?
The other day, you just bought a stack of autographs in here.
Oh, I had, and a glove with a Cassius Clay glove. Yeah. Yeah.
It seems to me, I used to think that I was obsessed with things and a strong collector, but I came to
It is amazing. I mean, I'm surprised. I'm surprised to see the exhibition, quite honestly. To see it after 4 years. I'm amazed that I did it.
It looks absolutely.
It's the most, when you see it, some of you will have seen it, but it looked terrific in Cardiff and St David's, but it's the best it's looked here, because there's a little bit more room here.
When the light is in that room where the portraits are, they'll start to glow as well, so it's going to look magnificent.
I mean, I can't thank the technician enough who hung it, and the lines are perfection. You know. It looks wonderful.
Let's see the last image.
Yeah. Here we got Captain Cat.
This is one of your portraits, and we kind of selected this because it's got a bit of you in it, as much as that's your beard, isn't it?
It's my beard, and the eyes are of
Some flyer, an airman?
a racing driver.
Sopwith?
Yeah, Tommy Sopwith,
Yeah.
who became blind, and in the photographs of him at the end of his life, I mean, you can't always tell that somebody's blind, but there is a blindness about the eyes. So, I don't know how I got him, but he does look blinded.
And all your portraits, you've said, are, you don't believe that you can invent a face from your imagination, or one can't do that. But
I can't, no.
So you you can do lots of other things. You take faces from real life. And I did have a lot of fun. I knew some of them already. There are some that are recognisable. I spotted Margaret Atwood tonight, which I had.
That's right. She's
Mrs. Willy-nilly.
The two that are deliberately.
Beryl Bainbridge is in it.
Yeah. The two that are deliberate are Burton and Elizabeth Taylor.
Yeah.
They're the two that were in the film in those characters, and you almost couldn't be anybody else. But the rest, as you say, Beryl Bainbridge. Who is she? Who is Beryl Bainbridge? Oh, yeah.
Mrs. Wilde.
Yeah.
Yeah, Margaret Atwood is Mrs. Willy-nilly. Why do you choose certain faces because of something about that person in real life, or about something about their faces suggest to you?
Yeah, I think everyone will have a different concept of who the people look like. And people won't agree with the way I've drawn them often, I'm sure. But I think I pictured them, and I still have a kind of library of imagery, which I started, it was, as a student, I was advised to do that as an illustrator. So I've still got eyes and faces and dogs, and so just sheets of stuff. And I think I would just imagine what Willy-nilly's nose was like, or his eyes, and find it in the library and copy it.
Somebody did make the calculator. First portraits, first voice was Ted Hughes. First voice is Ted Hughes.
Had I, yeah.
And then said that Michael Mitchell, first voice was said.
That's right, because that's right. I'd taken on that day in Larne, I'd taken a whole bunch of photographs, and I used some of the photographs as the illustrations. So the photograph of the pub with the naked lady blazing past the pub, Mike was in the picture. So I thought, well, how do I get around that? So I thought, well, it's fine. What are the voices? Are they ghosts? Do they exist? So he can be there as a kind of ghost. So that's why that's why he's in that picture, and that's why he became the first one. Yeah, he probably is, yeah.
Certainly we like to go back to, but a lot of them are just, the policeman, I saw the original photograph.
That's right, it's a famous photograph, isn't it? And in a way, that's part of the ongoing game. Particularly you're with appropriation, in a way it's the excitement of finding what it was appropriated from, isn't it?
Yeah, the fact that there are one or two straightforward found images or albums of colours by unknown painters, and looking for a couple.
Yeah.
There's a beautiful amateur painting of a couple.
Yeah.
Straight in, somebody asked you once, what would you do if a woman looks like a woman? That I paint that. I just put the name in. And others you've added little collages to sort of change.
It's perfect, isn't it? And there's a little boat at sea, I remember, isn't there?
Yeah, there's a few.
Yeah.
Cockle might be the only one haven't tampered with in any way.
Or added something to. Yeah, I think you're right.
But lovely having it in the mix of everything else. It's funny thinking of this play written in 1953. So this is before Elvis Presley, before rock and roll, before any British pop culture explosion. Yes, it is, after the war, which we were also talking about earlier, affected Dylan Thomas. Obviously, Swansea was blitzed, and it had an effect on how he thought of Swansea. And then he went, off and went to writing around the world and went to New York. But you have this poem that is like the essence of what was to come in some ways, the essence of pop art in some ways.
Yeah.
It's been absolutely lovely talking to you. And Jeff, the exhibition, I know some of you have seen it earlier, but launches tomorrow afternoon. It's absolutely wonderful. And It's very, of course Peter's right. It's laid out. And the print we have to tell you about again. So go and check out the print. It's lovely that you've made it for this.
Thank you for coming in this wonderful room. The last time, do you remember the last talk we did in Mumbles, in a tent with pouring rain, and a record of a jazz band that was louder than us, that they couldn't turn off, and probably 10 people were there. Yeah.
So this is slightly better.
This is better, yeah.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to see so many people here. I'm not sure, are we having a group photograph?
Not to this point.
It's not. I did ask the photographer to take an aerial shot and recreate their own version of the Sergeant Pepper's. Anybody wanted to wipe out the Swansea art scene? Tonight's the night to do it. So, thank you all so much for coming. So, that's good. We've got a nice aerial shot. I'm going to. After the lights.